Hello everybody and welcome to the second Marshall Brunch and Learn. And today we are featuring the University of Birmingham. I'm really excited to welcome members of the University of Birmingham to come and talk to us and tell us all about their wonderful university. I'm not going to say much except for to ask Ruth to unmute and to start the presentation.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you for hosting us today, and everyone joining us as well, giving up your lunches and spending some time with us. I hope you find it really useful. We're excited to tell you more about the University of Birmingham, and also for my colleagues joining me as well. Thank you. So to get started, our plan for the hour is for me to do a brief introduction on the university and the scholarships. Then Professor Michael Dobson will give you an introduction and kind of a little insight into our wonderful Shakespeare Institute and Stratford and beyond. A Fulbright scholar, Jacqueline Dell, is here to join us to tell us about her experiences. And then Emma Ettinger, who's due to join us September this year, is to tell us about her experience of Fulbright and the whole experience with that. And then we'll round up with some Q&A for any questions that you have, just to give you an insight into kind of what the plan of the day is. So this is pretty much my smaller team out of the big team. Some of you might have met Carl. He's visited Market quite a lot and has worked in the Americas, I think, for the last 8 years plus. Joelle used to be in my position. She's actually moved over to Africa, so some of you might have met Joelle. And then I've been in the role about a year now, so fairly new to the whole grand scheme of kind of the Americas as a whole. University of Birmingham is a campus-based university, our main campus being in Edgbaston and Selly Oak. And then we have the 3 other branches of the campus being the Shakespeare Institute, School of Dentistry and the City and Broad Street site. We're a large university, the 4th largest in the UK, with around 36,000 students. That's broken into around 64% of undergraduate and 36% of postgraduate. We have a lot of international students, so 8,000 in total, around 259 American students from over 39 different states, so a good representation of American students on campus. We're very popular per places, so apps are competitive, and difference to the US is that potentially 95% of our students complete their degree program and 79% gain a first or upper class. And as you can see in that top corner, some leading statistics on the university. We do have a beautiful campus on site, so sports pitches. Old Joe, who if you know anything about the University of Birmingham, you'll know Old Joe. He's very famous, and this is pretty much our beautiful campus, and if you want to hear more, I can tell you. These are our 5 schools that we're pretty much broken down into. I'd say some of our USPs are our campus, our proximity to the city centre, the range of courses and modules we have available. So we have 900 courses available to choose from. Research links, I'd really recommend looking into the Heroes campaign if you're interested in that, and our size, and that we're a Russell Group uni. These are the tuition fees to expect for 2020. So depending on the area that you'd like to study, you're looking at tuition fees around these. We do have one of the cheapest costs of living in the UK. So when you compare us to London, we are a cheap cost of living in the UK. So that really adds to affordability. Scholarships, unfortunately, Michael isn't here to join us today, but if you have any follow-up questions, I'm sure I'll be happy to help. But we award £5.8 million in scholarships to international students across the different pathways that comes in. Marshall scholarships, these are some of our historic Marshall scholarships. I'm sure Mary Daniel will be able to tell you more about Marshall, but just to kind of say that we've had a really good relationship with Marshall over the previous years. We also work with Fulbright, and we've got students to tell you all about that, so I'm not going to tell you any more on that. And then we do have 4 university scholarships of £5,000 each. To find out all about these funding opportunities, I'd advise this. And if any of you want these links afterwards, I'm more than happy to share this presentation because it has got links, contact details and things like that to try and keep it as sweet and brief as possible. So I'm going to hand over to the wonderful Professor Michael Dobson now to give you an insight into Shakespeare and Stratford, because I know that's hopefully all what you're here for. And thank you ever so much. Over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have to stop sharing and then I can start sharing, apparently. That seems to be the protocol. How nice. Right, now this is the great suspenseful moment. And there we are. Grand. Good. Well, it's lovely to be here. It's a huge privilege to be enjoying brunch again. I worked for 10 years in the United States, and brunch struck me as a very enlightened institution, which I'm afraid my working hours don't really allow me to indulge in the same way as I would like to back here in Britain. But what I'm going to talk about is why Birmingham has a Shakespeare Institute. How come the West Midlands has this great claim to be really in the center of the Shakespeare-speaking world. And what you're looking at on this title slide, if I move on to the next picture, if indeed my computer will enable me to do so, which it doesn't seem very happy to do. How annoying. Well, look, for the time being, you can see, for the next 20 seconds, we're fine. You can see that that's what the front door of the University of Birmingham looks like. There are actually 9 statues up there. Beethoven, Virgil and Michelangelo on the left. Over on the right, Watt, Faraday and Darwin, the scientists and engineers. And then in the middle, Plato, Shakespeare and Newton, with Shakespeare in pride of place. So pretty much every time I'm in a meeting on campus about budgets, I mention this statue or preferably point at it, saying that the founders of the university, when they put this building up in 1900, clearly intended that Shakespeare was the most important thing it was going to do. Now, if I fumble about a bit more, we can see whether I can somehow make the PowerPoint work a little more satisfactorily than that. Just do that, then go back there.
Maybe if you hit spacebar or one of the arrows, that worked for me.
Well, certainly that normally works for me too, but just at the moment, it doesn't seem very happy with it. Let me just go back. Have I ceased to share by any chance? All right, well, I'll start sharing again like that. Then I'll do that. How are we there? Can you see anything?
Yeah, we can see your slides.
Well, that's nice. If I do that. Oh, there we are. Look, it's moved on. Right, there's all those statues again. You know, I'm in the Shakespeare department. I'm not in IT. Birmingham, the first great industrial city in the middle of Britain, the second city, decided in the middle of the 19th century that now we had industrial production, there was no reason why everyone shouldn't have culture, and that Birmingham could have this utopian vision of civic culture where everybody could share and learn. And for Shakespeare's 300th birthday, Birmingham decided that the people of Birmingham ought to have the greatest Shakespeare library in the world. And Joseph Chamberlain, as you see, was the honorary secretary of this campaign, helped raise the money to build this fantastic library. It's a monument to Shakespeare in and of itself, and it includes everything you could possibly want if you're studying Shakespeare. In the top right-hand corner of your screen, you should see a copy of the first folio, or rather part of a page from the copy of the first collected edition of Shakespeare. That's a book on the open market worth about, I don't know, $15 million, stamped Birmingham Free Libraries Reference Department. You know, everybody in Birmingham owns this book. It's in the public library. And the Shakespeare Institute currently has a big grant-funded project to remind Birmingham about this fantastic library. And what you can see on your screen is there's a web address. You know, it's a terrific, that's the project web address. The library itself is now this very postmodern building that looks as though it's been designed with a spirograph and some cake boxes. But the entire Victorian Shakespeare library is still there as the top floor. And there you can see my colleague, Professor Ewan Fernie, looking at some of its contents with the great actor Adrian Lester. He's looking at some theatre posters from the career of Ira Aldridge. Birmingham, as well as having a statue of Shakespeare on the main campus, has had, since 1951, this lovely building in Stratford. It's an 18th century building, and it's entirely occupied, as our university propagandists tell the world, by heroes. There's some of us heroes standing around looking sinister. At the top left, you'll see the priceless portrait of the Moorish ambassador to the court of Elizabeth I, somebody who was around with his entourage in London around the time Shakespeare was writing Othello. It's the only major Elizabethan portrait of a Muslim. We're very pleased to have it. At the top right, our librarian, Karen Brown, who is herself a great stage historian, drinking a cup of coffee, Professor Tiffany Stern, she's very good at that, and this slogan that we're keeping Shakespeare alive. And, you know, obviously if you don't send us the ransom, that won't last, but we do. Now, Stratford, of course, has mattered to Shakespeare studies ever since Shakespeare studies were invented, because, you know, Shakespeare lived and died there and kept his family there, and people came up sporadically to ask questions about Shakespeare from the time of his death. But it really gets onto the map in 1769, when the council decided they would celebrate the fact that they were getting a beautiful new town hall by getting the star Shakespeare actor manager of the time, David Garrick, to come up to Stratford and organise a fan festival. The first great Shakespeare fan festival happened in Stratford in 1769. And that's Mr. Garrick in the middle of the screen, standing in front of his statue of Shakespeare, reciting his great poem about Shakespeare. To what blessed genius of the isle should gratitude her tribute pay? And it goes on quite a long time with some rather nice music in the background. But that statue, which Garrick donated to the town, is still there. It's on the facade of the town hall. So in a way, ever since 1769, Stratford has not only been the place Shakespeare lived and died and is buried, but a town that has actually dedicated itself to Shakespeare. And if you visit the bank right opposite the town hall, you'll see even that has statues of Shakespearean characters built into the facade. The Institute, you can almost see in this picture, except there's a big white lorry parked in the middle of the street. It's making a delivery to the excellent butcher's shop, but you know, that's beyond the scope of this presentation. So there is Stratford in all its glory, and Stratford asserted its centrality to Shakespeare again in the 19th century. In 1864, when Birmingham was building that fantastic public library of Shakespearean treasures, a campaign was gathering momentum to set up for the country a Shakespeare Memorial National Theatre, a theatre that would be subsidised to put on Shakespeare the way it should be put on, so that it would be exempt from show business. It wouldn't have to be commercialised. It could just be really, really good. There was a great argument as to whether it should be in Stratford or in London. Nothing happened in 1864 except a lot of committee meetings and a few parties. But in 1879, a very enlightened brewer in Stratford said, "What the hell, I'll pay." And Stratford acquired the first Shakespeare Memorial Theatre, this lovely red brick thing with a fire tower right next to the river. And the shell of that building is still there, though the interior has changed rather since then. At this point, Stratford becomes the Shakespeare destination. This is the standard Stratford Tourist Map from 1905. The theatre is down there on the river. Look, you can see my cursor if you're very lucky. There's the theatre. And the map supplies you with pictures of all the things you might see while you're staying in Stratford to see lots of Shakespeare performed there. So there's the statue of Shakespeare, Anne Hathaway's cottage, where his fiancée lived. There's the theatre. There's the Shakespeare Hotel, which still has rooms named after Shakespeare plays. They once put me in the Othello bedroom, which I think was really a very bad idea. The Clopton Bridge, the American Fountain, paid for by American temperance lobbyists who are fans of Shakespeare, but also this lovely house labelled Marie Corelli's house, which is right here on Church Street, pretty much just over the road from the school where Shakespeare went. Marie Corelli was a mad Edwardian novelist and spiritualist. Her real name was Mackay, but she called herself Corelli because it was so cool to be Italian. In fact, she had her own Venetian gondola on which she had herself paraded up and down the river. She campaigned for Stratford to be more Elizabethan. She would pay people to have brick facades taken off their houses to reveal the Elizabethan woodwork underneath. And it's her house to which, because she was such a best-selling writer, a number of people came. Mark Twain visited her. Sarah Bernhardt came. Ellen Terry, the actress, was a good friend. And in her later years, a schoolboy who was playing Kate in Taming of the Shrew was invited round for tea, and he was Laurence Olivier. So, you know, she was quite an important figure. Anyway, her house is now the Shakespeare Institute, and you know, the room where Twain visited her is now my office. After Marie Corelli's death, because Stratford continued to have this tremendous sort of cultural importance to the whole country and to many other people all over the world, Marie Corelli's house was actually bought by the British Council, the government organisation that was supposed to advance English-speaking civilization around the world. And it became one of their headquarters. It became the venue for an international Shakespeare conference to include only the top Shakespeare scholars from all over the planet who would all meet in this room, in this house. And it became the venue for the annual summer school run by the theatre, which was then still called the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre. And it was this building, and indeed this sort of what was already pretty much a going concern, that the University of Birmingham brilliantly had the idea of buying and taking over in 1951. And this is the very press story in the Times of London from August 1951, announcing the foundation of the Shakespeare Institute to be a research institute for postgraduate research work in Elizabethan life and literature. And I love the fact that the same page of the newspaper also has a news story about the new Avro Vulcan nuclear bomber, that this is this Cold War moment at which, you know, the interests of Western civilization are being supported by nuclear warfare, but also by the establishment of the Shakespeare Institute. And you'll note that one of the things that the Times reporter says just under the picture of the bomber is, well, the activities of the Shakespeare Memorial Theatre will provide a desirable association of study and stage. One of the reasons for having the Institute in Stratford is that there was a big Shakespeare theatre in Stratford, and obviously the two could talk to each other and possibly even learn from each other. And one of the results of that desirable association of study and stage over the last 60 odd years now has indeed been that the Shakespeare Institute has been one of the places in the world where there's been very close liaison and cross-fertilization between theatrical performance and scholarship. That's how the theatre looked in 1951. The old one had been gutted by fire. They built a much bigger one in 1932. And in 1961, it rebranded itself as the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, the home of the Royal Shakespeare Company. In the mid-1950s, one of the first research students at the Institute was the man in the middle of this picture. He's now called Professor Sir Stanley Wells. Then he was a PhD student. He went on to become a fellow of the Institute, teaching there. Then he went to Oxford to edit the Oxford Shakespeare, a very important groundbreaking edition of the complete works. And then he came back to the Institute to be the director of the Shakespeare Institute. When he was still a junior fellow in the mid-1960s, the person on the left in this picture came to Stratford to play Titania in Midsummer Night's Dream. And they became very, very good friends. They're godparents to each other's children. Her name's Judy Dench. And this picture was taken when she gave our annual public lecture in London that we organise. This was at the beginning of March. This was the last decent party I went to before they were banned. Judy was on cracking form and you know, talked a lot about the way she's worked with Stanley. Most of the archives of the Institute consist of pictures of Judy all over the building, doing different things on different occasions when she's been playing different parts. And she was the first theatre person to be made an honorary fellow of the university. Though Birmingham's had a very broad mind since, and our library is full of the personal archives of major theatre practitioners that we've known and worked with over the years. In the top left of this picture, there's the French poster for Ken Branagh's Hamlet. Ken was advised, well, continues to be advised on all his Shakespeare work by Russell Jackson of the Institute, which means we've got the best part of his archive for the making of his Shakespeare movies and many of his other Shakespeare roles. In the middle of the picture, that's Dame Harriet Walter in my office with Abigail Rokerson Woodall. Abigail's one of our faculty, a brilliant teacher and scholar of Shakespeare who used to play Catherine Zeta-Jones' sister on TV in the 90s and still performs from time to time. That's her edition of Hamlet up on the right. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, probably the best Cleopatra of all time, not excluding Cleopatra, that's Dame Janet Sussman, whose archive we also have, and there's a big painting of her on the wall outside my office, and she comes by. That's Sam West in the middle, wonderful associate artist of the RSC, and over at the bottom left is Sir Simon Russell Beale playing Prospero in the last RSC production, The Tempest, in 2016. And these are people we phone up. I mean, these are people who, if our students are having trouble finding archive materials about their work, we just put them in touch. They've become kind of a living part of the Institute. And we now, of course, have an actual formal arrangement with the RSC, an actual collaboration, rather than it just being us hanging around with each other in the pub after the show. We do actually formally work as the RSC's kind of academic wing, and our students work in their spaces, particularly this one. The other place, that's the structure behind Abigail and Ewan Fernie and I in this charming propaganda photograph. The studio theatre and sort of research laboratory of the RSC, which was reopened and refurbished by the university in collaboration with the company in 2016. It's got a nice coffee bar as well, and designated study spaces, and it's where they keep all the old costumes. So there's all kinds of fun to be had at the other place, quite apart from live theatre productions. And we work with the RSC around the world too. This is Henry V in Mandarin, opening in Shanghai in 2016, and a nice poster for the public event that I did with Gregory Doran, the artistic director of the Royal Shakespeare Company. That's Greg sitting in the middle of all those nice Chinese actors with his beard. The RSC has a project. It's commissioned fresh, much more actable Mandarin translations of the complete plays of Shakespeare, which are being performed in China one by one by Chinese companies. I've been over to see the ones that have happened so far. And the Institute has set up, in collaboration with Nanjing University, the Shakespeare Centre China. And we're helping the RSC workshop these translations with student actors. And the Shakespeare Centre China is also in alliance with Phoenix Publishing, who's publishing the translations as the publication of the Shakespeare Centre China. And that's that's a nice picture of me in Nanjing at the tomb of Guo Pu, the great local poet and necromancer of Nanjing from the 3rd century AD. So we work quite closely with Nanjing. We run collaborative symposia, and we will be running a big pan-Chinese Shakespeare competitive festival, which was due to happen this May, but will now happen next May, we hope. We also have a collaboration in Tokyo with Waseda University, and that amazing building in the bottom right is the best theatre history museum in Japan. It's built as a concrete replica of a Jacobean theatre, and it houses the personal collection of Shoyo Tsubushi, who was the first Japanese person to translate the complete works of Shakespeare in the early 20th century. And that collaboration is already now producing publications. You see the Arden Shakespeare are publishing this lovely collection of Japanese adaptations of Shakespeare translated back into English. At the top right, you see our new early career research fellow, Jessica Chiba, who is herself Anglo-Japanese. She's bilingual. She's working on what you can and can't translate between of Shakespeare's thinking between Japanese and English. And that's part of a poster from the last symposium we ran in Tokyo with Angus Jackson, who's a director with the RSC, Kelly Hunter, a great RSC actress and artistic director of her own company. And that's Nomura Mansai, huge star in Tokyo, who's designing their Olympics opening ceremony. He's a Kyogen actor, which means that about 15 generations of his family have been Kyogen actors. And by now they're genetically pretty good at it. And this is just a cross section, I suppose, of the kind of stuff that goes on in the Institute, because we're a very tightly knit but very well networked collection of Shakespeare scholars, all in a small house, publishing lots of stuff about Shakespeare. Most important publications in Shakespeare studies sooner or later come through the building if they don't originate in it. Top left, the Arden Shakespeare, that series of editions. Tiffany Stern, one of our professors, is one of the general editors. The New Oxford Shakespeare is edited by John Jowett, my deputy. That's another very important edition. Martin Wiggins is publishing this massive catalogue of everything we know about all the plays done in the British Isles between 1533 and 1642. So we occasionally do workshops of these obscure plays to try and persuade the RSC to revive ones they haven't done before. The Palgrave Shakespeare Studies series of monographs comes out of the Institute in collaboration with Dint McCallaghan, who's at Syracuse in New York. Or is it Syracuse? I get them mixed up. There's Professor Ewan Fernie again with his great book on Shakespeare and Freedom. He's mainly at the library in Birmingham, sharing it with the people of Birmingham at the moment. There's Erin Sullivan's latest book about melancholy. There's me writing about a Hamlet in the Ukraine for the London Review of Books. And there's just out this week, Shakespeare Sense, a book about Shakespeare and the senses, edited by Simon Smith, who's our resident early modern music specialist, and featuring a chapter by Erin Sullivan, the mistress of melancholy. So, you know, if you don't want to talk about Shakespeare, stay away from the Shakespeare Institute is my advice, because there's an awful lot of it goes on when we're not at the theatre talking about the actors. And yeah, so this is why when you come to the University of Birmingham, even if you're not remotely interested in Renaissance drama, you'll find that, you know, Shakespeare gets the star place for his statue above the main door, and why the university has such close links with Stratford, having turned Stratford into a university town by setting up the Institute there in 1951, and also in the heart of Birmingham, where the Birmingham Shakespeare Library is at the public library. And there we are. So if you do feel like studying Shakespeare, it's quite a good place to come, in my experience. I always wanted to, and they finally let me. Thank you. I will stop sharing. Ping.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Not at all. It's a pleasure.
See if we can get.
It's nice to see you all.
You're getting a lot of round of applause. Which is very valid. Did we say we were going to hold Q&A after that session or at the end for that session?
I think if anybody's got any questions specifically around this, I think it's probably good to do that now, and then we'll just do maybe 5 minutes of that, if that's okay.
Lovely.
So if anybody has any questions, please write them in the chat, and Sarah will read them out for you.
Oh, we have one question coming in. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Let's see. It says, are any of the degree programs jointly credentialed with the RSC?
Well, we are officially the academic collaborator with the RSC. So to that extent, particularly Shakespeare and Creativity, which works with the RSC built in, is sort of credentialed with them. But I'm not sure you can have a degree program that's credited with a theatre company. Certainly the Lord Chamberlain's Men never accredited any degrees at all. There's no evidence that Shakespeare ever attended a degree ceremony, I'm afraid. He was too busy.
Thank you. And then a couple others coming in. One is if a student...
Yes. If you're on the main campus of Birmingham, then you can come down to Stratford whenever you like. Undergraduates, especially if they're reading English, or drama, come to the Institute a lot on day trips, and they have a whole residential week with us every year. If you've got a Birmingham ID card, you just wander into the Institute, use our lovely library, just knock on my door. I'm generally there when the building's open. Just for a semester or a summer is more complicated. I think, because we don't do any undergraduate kind of diplomas that are just for a semester's work. We do have exchange students who come over for via Erasmus and programs like that for just a year or just a term, and a lot of them take a Shakespeare course.
Thank you. There's another question that says, if a student wanted to work with the Shakespeare Institute in Stratford, would the student interface much with the campus in Birmingham as well, or no?
Yeah, I mean, because that's where all the offices are, that's where you get your ID card, and that's where the university's copy of the first folio is kept at the Cadbury. So even though the Institute has its own library of 60,000 hand-chosen exquisite items, there are some things like the first folio that you'd go to the Rare Book Library in Birmingham for. Of course, there are lots of other scholars working on related topics and music and history and other stuff from the period. And there's a whole seminar on Shakespeare's period that happens on campus, as well as the weekly seminar just on Shakespeare that happens at the Institute.
Great, thanks. Looks like one more. Could you say a bit about how students not studying Shakespeare might benefit from the Shakespeare connection? Do you offer courses or public programs?
There's a lot of public events happen at the Institute. Any student is welcome to come to any of them. The Shakespeare Club of Stratford, founded in 1824, the oldest Shakespeare club in the world, meets at the Institute every week. Different people become president. When I was president of it for a year, and then I handed over to Jeremy Irons. He did fine. There's lots happens. I mean, if you like Shakespeare, it's really just nice, even if you're reading engineering, to be studying at a university where after a day's work in the library, you can go and see the Royal Shakespeare Company in the evening, or at least that was always my sense of things.
Thank you, Professor Dobbs. And it looks like that's all the questions we have for now, so it might be a good time to introduce the students.
Brilliant, thank you so much, and hopefully you've had opportunity to ask the questions. If you have any ideas whilst the students are speaking about questions you'd like to ask, then please store those up and we'll answer those at the end, because I always know that kind of once you've had time to brew on things, you're like, oh, I really wish I'd asked that. So yeah, so the next speaker that I'd like to introduce is Jacqueline Dell, a Fulbright Scholar of 2019-20, and she'd like to speak to you about her experience of the university campus, moving from the USA to the UK, some of the differences with that, and I'm sure she's got loads of other things that she'd like to share with you. So welcome and thank you for speaking. I think you need to turn yourself off mute, sorry.
I do it myself. Great, thank
There
you.
you go.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, so thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. I'm a little intimidated to follow that beautiful, eloquent explanation of the Shakespeare Institute. I haven't had a chance to get down to Stratford upon Avon yet, but now I'm inspired. As soon as I get back to the UK, that's one of the first places I'm headed. So yeah, so my experience with it's a whirlwind, it seems like now, with everything that's been going on. But I started with getting my undergraduate and master's degree at the University of South Florida in St. Pete. And I am honored to talk to scholarship advisors, because that has actually had a prominent role throughout my research career. Even in my undergrad experience, I started to kind of hear that research would be important trying to get in graduate school. I did see, can you hear me all right? I'm getting, it says my connection is not very good. Can you hear me okay?
That's a lot clearer.
Okay, it just come a little bit closer. Okay, right. Okay, so like I was saying, throughout my classes, they were saying that research would be very important. And so I didn't see many opportunities on campus. I knew I wanted to study addiction, and I didn't see many opportunities available to me at my small kind of liberal arts college. So I actually contacted my Office of National Scholarships at the University of South Florida, Tampa. I was attending the University of South Florida in St. Pete, so it's a smaller campus. And so that, that office actually helped me get a placement at Brown University. So they were really helpful walking me through the scholarship process very early when I was an undergrad. So I ended up getting 2 different summer internships with the Office of National Scholarships before I ever heard about Fulbright. So I was very familiar with this process, with trying to apply for scholarships and gearing up to be a candidate, and all the the things that entail trying to apply for scholarships. So I ended up getting a master's degree, and when it came time to apply for a PhD, they say that you look for a mentor, not the university. So I found a mentor that I wanted to work with, who was at the University of Trento in Italy. And I thought, well, I don't know about going to study in Italy. That would be a little bit intimidating. And so when I was about to graduate, I found out that he actually wasn't at the University of Trento anymore. He was at the University of Birmingham. And I thought, well, I don't know about Italy, but I think I could go to the UK. I think I could make that work. So I started to do a little bit of research, and I discovered that the University of Birmingham was one of the top research universities in the world. They have the Center for Human Brain Health, which was really interesting to me because studying addiction, you can have so many different approaches. So, social and behavioral, and I was really interested in the neural mechanisms. But if you're going to study the way that a brain kind of is aberrant in its processing, I felt like I wanted to study the way that a healthy brain works, and really kind of understand the way that the processing is functions properly before you can understand the way that it kind of works in a maladaptive manner, such as in addiction. So the Center for Human Brain Health is an interdisciplinary kind of center where different modalities, electroencephalography and fMRI and all of these different modalities come together. So I figured if I work in an area where I have the opportunity to have access to all of these different modalities, it would be amazing to be at the center of that. So I thought, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to work. This is cutting edge research. This is front line of where, you know, this research is happening. And that would be amazing if I could do that. Now, how do I get there? So I contacted Dr. Clayton Hickey, who is one of the leading researchers in the field of reinforcement learning and reward learning, which is what I had been doing in my master's program. And he and I talked about working together, and he thought that would be a great idea. And we were just now looking at funds. And so he said, okay, well, let's see if we can, you know, kind of supplement this grant that I have. And I said, okay. So I heard about a Fulbright representative coming to my university, and I thought, okay, well, let me go hear what they have to say. And I went to a seminar that was explaining what Fulbright was, this kind of collaborative exchange of ideas between cultures, that you go and kind of soak up being in a different part of the world and experience not just academically, but everything about being in a different part of the world. And I liked that because, again, addiction is such an interdisciplinary problem. It's not just one mechanism. It's not just a brain disorder. It's social, it's mental illness, it's biochemical. There's so many different aspects. And so I figured culturally, there are probably different aspects of that affect the families that are involved and the way people are raised and these kinds of things. So I figured, what better way to incorporate how addiction impacts us here in America. It might affect people differently there in the UK. So I went and applied. I, again, contacted my Office of National Scholarships, went back to my old faithful, the same representative that helped me with my summer internships. And they helped me with the application process, which was intense. It took 10 months. Where they worked back and forth. We did a lot of revisions. It was a personal statement, a statement of purpose. Yeah, and we went back and forth. They set up mock interviews. They really were very thorough in helping me to prepare for the process. And then, yeah, so I got my first round. I went through a personal interview over Skype, and then, yeah, got the placement and received the award, which was amazing. It was a shock, but it was great. And then the experience of the Fulbright was phenomenal. They set up different conferences. They took us to London, they took us to Cardiff, and just really kind of walked us through everything that we would need being in a different country, any kind of resources that we would need, very attentive, very helpful, just, you know, not just academically, but personally, we were really supported. So it's an amazing, amazing institution and organization to be a part of.
Great, thank you so much. That was really helpful and insightful. Thank you so much, Emma. I know it can be quite daunting when you've got faces, especially when you've got, I'm hating not seeing people in face. So you did really, really well there. And I think hopefully others, because I think we might have a couple of students on here or kind of, you know, fellowship advisors that are guiding students through this. So that's really helpful and insightful. And thank you very much for joining us. Emma, would you like to speak about your experience? So Emma Ettinger is the Fulbright Scholar for 2021. So she's about to join us and actually join us for MA Shakespeare and Creativity. So yeah, talking about kind of your experience from your side of things and what you're anticipating the University of Birmingham to be like, and potentially why you chose this would be helpful.
Sure. So I did my undergrad at Syracuse University in stage management. So my background is very much in technical theater. And while I was there, I was taking a lot of dramatic literature courses and have always had a really deep love for Shakespeare. And as I was finishing up, I was working on some adaptive playwriting and some dramaturgy, and had a couple of faculty mentors who were like, are you sure you don't want to pivot into this? And I went, no, I'm going to keep with this stage management thing. So I was working professionally as a stage manager for a couple of years. And I went, actually, I really do want to go back to Shakespeare and academia and dramatic literature, and towards working as a playwright on adapting some of Shakespeare. And someone at the Office of Scholarship and Fellowship Advising had reached out to me when Fulbright added stage management to their list of creative category awards. And I went, well, I don't know that I want to study stage management somewhere, but this is a really great opportunity to look into ways to make this career pivot. So I was looking at Shakespeare studies programs at a variety of universities in the UK, and Birmingham's really stood out to me. The first thing was that connection with the RSC, being somewhere in undergrad where we worked really closely with a professional theater was so useful for me. And I learned so much about the craft and being able to learn something in class and then see it applied by professionals. And then when I started looking into the program, I saw that the Shakespeare Institute had several different master's programs, and that really excited me because that meant that there was interdisciplinary focused work going on. And then I clicked on the description for this Shakespearean creativity program and went, wait, you can get a degree in that? For me, being able to merge the academic approach to Shakespeare with working on new creative work is really everything I've sort of been finding out that I want to do. So that's sort of the ideal place to keep exploring it. So I applied for Fulbright. I 2 application cycles. I was a semifinalist last round and then was selected this year. So if you've got students who are interested in applying, I would definitely recommend going for a second round. I learned so much working on my first application that strengthened my application to the grad program, and then working on that application so much that strengthened my Fulbright application again, and I think really helped me the second time around. So I'm really excited to head over to the Shakespeare Institute, hopefully in the fall. We'll see how travel restrictions go, but definitely to starting the program either way.
Thank you so much, Emma, and congratulations for sticking with it and eventually getting a scholar. I think that determination paid off, luckily. So we're really looking forward to welcoming you, and I'm hoping to see you in person sometime soon. So congratulations with that, and we'll keep you up to date with what's happening with coming to the UK, because I know that's one of your biggest questions. I've asked kind of how I can help, and I think that's the question on everyone's lips at the moment. So we're just bearing with it and seeing what we can do. With that then, I'm going to thank all my speakers and open it up to a Q&A generally on kind of anything that I can help with, or any questions that you have. I'm keen to kind of answer whatever might go on your mind or anything like that.
Ruth, it looks like there was a question about whether students are able to get University of Birmingham housing, and Professor Dobson said there's very good housing. I wondered if any of the presenters wanted to add to that, or whether the students wanted to give their perspective.
I think Ruth, the question was, if they don't get college housing, where else could they live as well?
Okay, so accommodation, I think, is a key question I get from a lot of students, because it's kind of their security blanket. It's where they kind of want to call home and things like that, and also kind of parents and friends. So yes, we do have accommodation on campus that's university owned. The best thing about that is if kind of anything happens, then it's the university that you speak to, so it's a direct relationship. So in the first instance, I usually tell students to try and go down that route, because it's just an easier working relationship. They range kind of in price. I think they start around £110 and go up quite dramatically to having your own suite and it being very, very kind of plush. So there's a price range to suit a lot of people. You can have meal plan included in that. So that's where you have roughly 2 meals a day, either on campus or back at your accommodation. And on campus, we also have lots of shops, bars, restaurants and stuff close by as well to kind of meet that need with food, or you can just cater yourself. Both have kitchens and they're the same size, so it's up to the students with that. It depends if they like cooking and they're good at it, or if they want to be a bit more lazier and use their time elsewhere doing other stuff in libraries, and go to see concerts, going to Stratford. It depends what they want to do there. We do have private accommodation too, and have some really good working links and relationships with private accommodation, and with this crisis we're only strengthening those to see how they can support students during this, and how they can be as flexible as we are as a university. They're close by as well. They're really kind of close to campus if you wanted to live directly in the campus vicinity and area, which is called Selly Oak, and most students choose to live in that area. So they're either like private flats, and usually around 6 rooms per flat, or a lot of students rent a private house too. So you'd have a landlord, and there's a team on campus called Living, and they'd help students with contracts and looking through those, as well as having assured landlords as well. They've treated students well previously. I'm sure Professor Dobson would be able to speak about the accommodation in Stratford more than I would, because it's very specific. I think students have to sort that out on their own, but he'd follow up with that. But there is a whole range. And also, if students want to live in the city centre, that's 7 minutes by train from campus, and we're the only UK mainland university to have our own train station. So students sometimes choose to live in the city and commute to campus, rather than live on campus and have that full campus experience. It just depends on the student. I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that. I think Emma's trying to...
Yeah, I can add to that. I live in Selly Oak. I live in a private flat. I've been very pleased with it. I know several students live in the house shares, and so like you were saying, there's so many different ranges, but that whatever you want to however you want to be accommodated there's something for everyone. So I think, if, like you said, to get with Professor Dobson, but Selly Oak is where most students live, and it's a real close walk to uni, and there's lots of shops, and so it's usually students start there.
Yeah, as you've heard, the university doesn't have any university accommodation in Stratford. Students who choose to be at the institute and who choose to base themselves in Stratford generally wind up sharing houses together, which are often passed on down the generations of institute students and become extremely well known. But it's quite possible to live in university accommodation in Birmingham and come down to Stratford by train. I've had some terrific PhD students who've done just that. One of the advantages being that they're closer to the lovely art gallery on campus, and indeed to the concert hall, named after our first professor of music, Sir Edward Elgar. That's why Beethoven is up there on the left of that pantheon of statues. But yeah, I mean, Stratford's a tourist town, so there's lots of accommodation. Birmingham is a large, flourishing, interesting city, and the university's got lots of nice places to live and serve lots of other people too.
Thank you all. Another question about funding, not only for housing, but for tuition, the whole enchilada. How did the university supplement Fulbright, which I think would only cover a year of the PhD program? So I guess alternative sources of funding and supplementary sources of funding in addition to Fulbright. If any of you could speak to how you're funding your experience.
I mean, I can speak to my experience because Fulbright did supplement my first year of my PhD, and then my lab had a grant to cover my second and third year. So that's how that was taken care of for me.
I think a lot of the time, if it's PhDs, that tends to be the way. If students are relying on funding, then they tend to source funding for a second and third year, and that's quite common no matter what university you go to. I think once you become a bit more savvy with getting funding through different streams, then a lot of students look to other avenues to support themselves, or the university tries to support those, and that's a conversation with the academics that you've stricken that up with. A lot of students do choose to work as well. So on campus, we do have something called WorkLink, and that supports students with finding jobs on campus that are well paid. That could be anything from helping academics to working in some of the shops and bars, to doing some of the admin type work, to library type stuff. And it can be quite flexible around your studies too. So I always try and campaign for students to take those sort of jobs rather than out of university type jobs, because they're not as flexible, and sometimes we have students missing classes and lectures because they have to support themselves. So I'd always recommend students to try and take those sort of jobs, or if not, try and utilise their summer and winter vacations or kind of weekends and stuff to support that side of working and kind of supporting their studies and funding. And some of them like ambassadors and just talking about their experiences, or doing some online stuff, so it can really meet their needs that way. And there's other additional funding and support that's kind of within, as I said, that kind of funding database. So I'd really recommend having a look on there too.
Thank you. This is a question for Emma. Brian is wondering, can you speak a little bit more about your reapplication process for Fulbright? What do you think changed between your two applications? Were you able to get accepted to the master's program the first year and defer it?
So yes, I did get accepted to the master's program the first year, and I accepted my letter of acceptance, and then several months down the line, when I had heard back from Fulbright and was sort of taking stock of personal finances, I said that I needed to push it back a year, and was really, really grateful that the university and the Shakespeare Institute agreed to defer my acceptance by a year so that I could start this upcoming fall instead. And then had some jobs lined up where I knew that I was closer to being able to make that program work even if I didn't get the Fulbright. I think I learned a whole lot more about what I wanted to do and the sort of work I was interested in doing through the process of doing 2 Fulbright applications, doing application for the graduate program, and I also did a Marshall application in there. So there was a whole lot of thought about what I wanted to do, and the process of writing essays would put things in my head that several months later I'd go, oh, actually, here's what I'm more interested in. So that extra time and that extra round of drafts really helped me to articulate things better.
Thank you, Emma. And a couple people have commented on the students' achievements and perseverance, and so well done, both of you. Another question, it says, for Marshall applicants in STEM fields, could you say a bit about those departments and any outstanding institutes or research centers on the University of Birmingham campus?
So research institutes for kind of STEM type fields, I think within engineering and physical sciences, we've got the Birmingham Centre for Nuclear Education and Research, the Centre for Systems Modelling and Quantitative Biomedicine, Healthcare Technologies Institute, and the Institute for Gravitational Waves Astronomy, which we've actually got a Nobel Prize for, so that's kind of probably our most dramatic research area within engineering and physical sciences. I'll send a link through to that research information there. It does depend on the course that students are looking into, but we do have some amazing facilities within those areas. So we've got a collaborative teaching laboratory 1 and 2, and that's designed so that the Laboratory 2 was only opened, I think, last year, and that's designed so students work alongside one another to get real world practice and experience of not just working with a bond set and industry type of student, and with the most up-to-date technology and kit. And we're investing in a brand new engineering school that's due to be opened, I think, later this year, if not early next year, and that's to house as well the national rail and kind of the railway aspects of kind of the research that the university is really known and kind of works globally and collaboratively across many institutions with that area as well. So it does depend on the course and the area of kind of research potentially that a student or yourselves are looking for, and it can help with that. But that's a bit of a summary, hopefully.
Thank you, Ruth. Looks like we don't have any other questions, so I'll give NAFINs a moment to ask any final questions. And I'll just say thank you so much on behalf of NAFA, and thank you, Mary, for another great Marshall Monday.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to all my speakers and for everyone giving up their time. Really appreciate it. If you're happy to share my slides around, then I'm more happy for anyone to get in touch and do any follow-up that way. And hopefully I'll speak and meet you in some sort of capacity in the future, but really appreciate you spending the time to come and join us and find out a little bit more about the university. And again, for our amazing speakers that have given up their time today, again, I really appreciate your time, so thank you. And thanks for hosting.
Thank you, everybody. Sorry, Blue's now in the way. Thank you, everybody, for today. We have recorded it and we will be posting it out, and Sarah Luann will be able to share the slides as well. So thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you next Monday for the next Marshall Monday, and thank you, the University of Birmingham, for doing such a wonderful job today. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Professor Dobson,
Bye.
Emma. Thank you, Ruth. Thanks, Mary.